Hi, guys. Welcome here to another episode of the Chimps podcast. Today, Brock and I will be talking about our top 10 Dynasty quarterbacks, including rookies. These rankings are based on a PFF draft where number one went Caleb Williams, number two went Drake May, and number three went Jaden Daniels. So, Brock, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll start with my number 10. So just to kind of put this out there, so I have Justin Fields at number 10, but with an asterisk, because if the Bears draft Caleb, then they're obviously not going to have Fields. So I believe that Fields would be a good fit in Atlanta. So if he goes there, I feel like he would be, in my opinion, the 10th best quarterback for Dynasty. Um, and then I actually have Joe Burrow not in my top 10 because of that. But if Fields doesn't go to Atlanta, I would have put him at my number 10.
So with Fields, there's a lot of insecurity about him. His contract is going to be expiring. He's on his second team. He really hasn't proven himself too much in the league at this point at an elite level. So what makes you more comfortable putting him at 10 over Burrow, a, almost Super Bowl winner?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think he's definitely the better. I think Joe Burrow's the better quarterback, like as a quarterback. But I think for as far as fantasy purposes, in my opinion, he has the better rushing ability. Um, I think if he goes to Atlanta, he actually has good receivers compared to what he had in with the Bears. Then he also has a good guy in Pitts, Kyle Pitts at tight end. Then they got a good running back duo with Bijan and what's his name? The other
Algier.
guy, Algier. Yeah.
Yep.
So he can do maybe some RPOs there and maybe get him going there. I don't know. I just see him being able to run all over the place in Atlanta, and then I mean, his I feel like his passing isn't terrible, and if they do a lot of RPOs there, they have a good uh, running game with those two running backs. I feel like that'll open the passing game more potentially, and maybe give him a better opportunity than what he had in Chicago. So that's just my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a
Oh,
pretty
and
bold.
and also sorry, and also his age. I know because since this is for um, it's not a redraft fantasy. It's for what do you call it? Dynasty. Um, so obviously Burrow isn't old, but I mean Fields is younger, has more years to kind of get it going, So that also played a factor in my ranking.
Okay. Um, I guess the one thing that's kind of a wash between the two of them, they've both been kind of injury prone at
Yeah.
different levels, obviously. Burrow's had the two season ending injuries, while Fields has just been kind of in and out of the lineup. So they both have some red flags, but in my opinion, if you look at my rankings on the left, I have Burrow at 6. So I think Burrow is an elite passer. So depending on your format, his value could change. He's got some mobility. He can get you a few hundred yards a season if needed. Um, he has some of the best weapons in the league, and depending, reports are they're retaining Higgins with the tag. I expect Mixon to stay, and probably Boyd will leave in free agency. So they have a couple young receivers in Yoshibas and Charlie Jones. So one of them may fill that role, and then also they have a mid first round pick because of the Burrow injury. So I can see them going after another weapon, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver at some point in the first couple of rounds.
All
So I would prefer Burrow significantly over Fields and even a lot of your bottom half of your top 10.
right. So then I see you got at your number 10, you got Caleb.
Yeah. So Caleb has some elite traits when it comes like arm talent wise. If he goes to the Bears, like they're projecting in this draft, and getting another weapon on the outside at 9 between DJ Moore and whatever receiver they pick, plus the kind of committee running back group they have. I think they have some pieces in place, plus Komet at tight end, where he has some weapons his first year. Hopefully, a team that's going to build around him. So far, the GM's done a great job kind of building that team, especially with the decisions he made last year. And I think his value is going to be pretty insulated because he is pretty highly regarded. The only thing I really question with him would be his size, because right now I think he's listed at like 6'1", so we'll find out what he weighs in and measures in that at the combine. And then he doesn't play that great structure from what I've seen, and a lot of people report, but the talent's there, and there's no reason why NFL coaches can't clean it up. So he's my 10th.
All right. Okay. So then at number 9, I have C.J. Stroud. I think he's a good young guy. He's only 22. I think that he's got a good team around him as far as like receivers, and then I definitely think they'll grab, whether it's an off season or maybe draft running back, and then maybe they even get more talent at their receiver position to just be that much scarier, because why not? But so I see him as like being a very accurate guy, not throwing a lot of picks. So that's definitely huge, because you don't want a guy who throws a whole bunch of picks, loses you, depending on your scoring format, two points for every pick you lose. So the only downside I see with him is that he's not a huge rushing threat. So that kind of is why I bumped him down a little bit. And also because he is young. It was just his first year last year. It was a really great year, obviously, because he won Offensive Player of the Year, or Rookie Offensive Player of the Year. So maybe it was just a fluke, or maybe it wasn't a fluke, but like he won't have as great of a season as he did last year, because maybe the teams will start to figure him out. Who knows? But yeah, I got him at my number 9 down there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think, in my opinion, I would classify Stroud as a very similar player to Burrow. So he's got some decent playmakers, a good system he fits into. He's a very precision passer with some mobility, not like a crazy elite amount. He's never going to be a true rushing threat. But him and Burrow, to me, are like the same player, at least in fantasy. The big difference for Dynasty then would be the age. So that's why I have them 5, 6 back to back and towards the top of that second tier.
Okay. And then, yeah, see, your number 9 is Dak.
Yeah, so Dak definitely is the oldest QB on this list. I think he's about 31. But it looks like Dallas, they're different than they were in the past. They aren't the ground and pound team you're used to, like, 5, 6, 7 years ago with Zeke. They've kind of opened the offense up with McCarthy. CD is one of the top receivers in the league. They've had some good accessory pieces to that offense between Schultz in the past, now with Ferguson, Cooks, and they've had pass catching running backs with Pollard. They kind of just air the ball out, even though they have an elite defense. But it's just kind of the change in mindset of the team. And I think they're looking to, really run up the score on people. And that, to me, means fantasy points. And I believe he's going to get an extension, and he's in a good situation that fits him and a team that believes in him still. So I put him in at 9. I would take him over some of these rookie quarterbacks upcoming, just because of the unknown factor a little bit with Daniels and May. Yeah. They, are talented, but I don't know if I love the Washington or Patriots situation based on the mock draft.
Yeah, definitely. So then I got, at my number 8, I got Caleb Williams. Like you were already talking about, he's got just so much, well, we think he's got so much talent. Whether it translates to the NFL, we'll have to see. I think it will. might take a few years just because the Bears, like you were saying, they don't have like amazing talent right now, but they're on their way there.
Yep.
But I feel like it's not going to be a like last year with Stroud, like he just like goes off and wins offensive rookie of the year. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he'll have a good year. Like he's not going to be a bust or anything. But I mean, I just because they don't have that many weapons right now, I feel for the Bears, it's going to be hard for him to be like in the top 5 for me for fantasy, but I think he can get there eventually. Just not right now. Um, and like you were saying, I mean, he hasn't had any experience in the NFL, and he could be a flop. He could turn into a Sam Darnold or a who else? Manziel, Johnny Manziel. He could turn into those guys, and
Right.
but I think he's got too much talent where he'll flop completely, but he definitely has the potential to not be as good as everyone thinks he's going to be, which
Okay.
that's what everyone has that aspect.
So considering that you have Stroud above, or sorry, Williams above Stroud. So Stroud is only 1 year into the league. He played very well last season. What makes you comfortable putting Caleb above Stroud?
So they were kind of like at the same spot for me. I just put Caleb there just because if you're trying to build a team for your fantasy for this specific league, I mean they are the same age. They're both 22. Um, so I don't know. I just thought because I think he will eventually surpass Stroud.
Okay.
That's kind of why I had it like that. I think obviously Stroud, if he has the same year he had last year, he'll definitely be better that specific year. But I think in the coming years, I think he'll eventually be surpassed by Caleb.
Yeah, and I think one way you can put it is Caleb has a lot of hype. He's got a little bit
Hmm.
more mobility to his game. And there were some people that didn't really believe in Stroud last year for some
Hmm.
reason between the like cognitive tests and his lack of mobility and all these things that came up before the draft. So, he was
Yeah.
typically the second quarterback taken, but not too many people had them as their top quarterback. So maybe there's still some doubt. I'm not sure, but I
Yeah.
can see your point.
And I guess I'm putting a little more emphasis on like the young at the being young aspect of this just because it's for this specific league that we're doing. If it
Mhm.
was a redraft, I would definitely totally have it different. But I mean, I think I'm just putting a little more value in the age aspect and the potential to eventually be great. I guess I'm putting a little more value in that.
Right. And if the Bears end up with DJ Moore and then
Hmm.
Odunze or Neighbors or something like that at 9, I would argue that that pairing plus Komet is better than what they have in place
Yeah,
in Houston. So,
yeah, would be for sure on paper would definitely be better.
right. So
So
at 8 for me, I put Kyler. Kyler, once his knee kind of, I guess, felt better for him at the end of the year, he started showing some flashes of the old Kyler. And I've seen Kyler carry some dumpster teams from Arizona to fantasy relevance. So if they're going to get a young stud receiver, possibly in Harrison at the top of the draft, maybe even another one later on between that, Michael Wilson, James Conner still under contract. Um, they're looking good on the outside. And I like his rushing abilities. He's not that old. I know he's undersized and battled some injuries, but I don't see him changing his game anytime soon. And I would expect him to kind of have a similar career path to Wilson, where that athleticism kind of dies down. He may begin to struggle a little bit, but for the next handful of years, I suspect that he's a top option.
mhm. All right. So on to number seven, I have Jaden Daniels at seven. So with the mock draft saying he's going to the Patriots, um, so I got him above Caleb because of his rushing ability. And I feel like if he goes to the Patriots, their offensive coordinator is Alex Van Pelt. I feel like he'll be a good help because he was Aaron Rodgers' quarterback coach for a few years, and then the last few years he was with the Browns, and they had a pretty good offense. They weren't like amazing. They weren't like a Chiefs or a Bills or anybody like that by any means, but I feel like they had a good offense. So again, this is kind of a risk because he's young, hasn't been in the league. I'm kind of basing it more on his potential, um, as opposed to like Stroud. He like proved himself last year, but I'm basing the fact that I think he has more potential, and obviously his rushing ability would put him over the top for this because fantasy, you want a quarterback with that has the ability to rush. So I think I think he'll eventually get there. It might take him maybe a year or something, but I think um, the one well, a couple downsides is that again, Young not in the league, but then the Patriots don't really have any weapons. But I feel like with the new culture, they'll be willing to try different things as that they weren't trying in the past because of what 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 their old culture was and all of that stuff. But yeah, that's my number seven, Jane Daniels.
So when I look at Daniels, I see Robert Griffin, except I don't think his arm is as good. He's like a slender, narrow, straight line runner. I don't think he's actually as athletic as RG3 either. RG3 was like a straight up elite track athlete, but um, he's like the watered down version.
Mm,
I would absolutely hate to see him on New England just because I don't have any faith they're going to have enough weapons around him for him to succeed anytime soon. They don't have a tremendous amount of cap space. I think they're pretty average, and they don't have any extra draft capital. So you're going to need to really focus on building the offense because their best players, all of them, are free agents. I know Bourne's a free agent coming off the knee. I
mm,
believe Henry's a free agent. So your biggest playmakers really aren't going to be on the team. So they're going to be kind of starting from scratch with Douglas and then Stevenson, I guess, in the backfield. So I wouldn't want that around my young quarterback, and for sure that would boot him out of my top 10 at this point, just because even he could fail and it wouldn't be his fault.
yeah, that could be like the same thing with Fields, where he
Yep.
has he has the potential, but the team isn't really building anything around him to help him.
Right. And I would say I think Fields on paper is an all around better prospect than Daniels between the size, athletic ability, arm talent, everything like that.
Yeah, it's
So
a
for
risk for
me,
sure. It's a risk.
yeah, yeah, for me at 7, I put Justin Herbert. The best way I could describe Herbert is he has Josh Allen level talent between the size, athletic ability, but he performs on a fantasy level of Jared Goff, and he should be a top 5 quarterback every year. He comes close, but for some reason his like depth of average target is not very deep. His weapons always get hurt. And now he's going to have a new coach with Harbaugh, who I think is a great coach, but he's also very, very reliant on the run. So maybe does that open up the play action passing game for Herbert a little bit? Does he push the ball down the field? Possibly, but his overall passing volume may decrease compared to years past. So I think he's going to hover between that QB 5 to 8 range probably for the next few years, up and down depending on how good he was the year before.
All right. So I got Mahomes at number six. Um, So I got him at number 6 outside of the top 5 because so he's 28. It's not the youngest, but it's not old. He's kind of like pretty much at his prime right now. He probably has another like 4 or 5 years of his elite level.
Yep.
But then even when he drops off, he's still going to be probably still in the top 2 for quarterbacks. Not as far as for this, but I'm talking about like overall quarterback play.
Yep.
Um, but so that's kind of why I have him down, just because he's old. He's getting older, and he's coming off a not amazing year for his standards. So maybe that trickles into this year a little bit. Maybe it takes a little bit for them to get things going, and they're also kind of getting a run game going with Pacheco, and I feel like that could definitely hurt him because obviously they're going to run the ball more. They're not really getting many passes thrown with Mahomes or touchdowns thrown with him. So, because normally in the red zone it would be all Travis Kelce, but seems like over the last like half of the season, and then in the playoffs and Super Bowl, anytime they get inside the 5, they hand it off to Pacheco. It seems like so. I think that could potentially hurt him. That's why I dropped him down to 6 for me.
Do you think if the Chiefs add a outside wide receiver like A.D. Mitchell out of Texas in this mock, substitute him for another player you think would be available that you like there? Between him, Kelsey probably playing another year, maybe two, and then obviously them being able to maybe acquire someone free agency, and they still have Rice. Um, does that entice you to move him up, or would you keep
Yeah.
him?
So yeah, if they got a good receiver, I feel like I could probably bump him up to 5 over Love. Um, I wouldn't bump him up um, above Lamar or Hertz or Allen or Richardson, just because he doesn't have that. I mean, he does run, but obviously not like those other 4 people. Um, and I think that having that rushing ability definitely helps for fantasy, and definitely helps when you're inside the 5. They could get a rushing touchdown um, for themselves when, like I was saying, when now, like when if they're inside the 5, they normally just hand it off to Pacheco because he's just a ground and pound type of guy, and they want to protect their quarterback, not have him get injured. So, but yeah, if they got a receiver, I think I would bump him up to 5 over Love.
Okay, so to me, Mahomes is always going to be one of the top few quarterbacks. His baseline is too good to move him out of there. I think for the next 4 or 5 years, like you were saying, he's entering probably his peak years here. Obviously, he's been already statistically and play wise one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. But I would say he's got crazy ability to extend plays. Get out of the pocket, get around people, get downfield rush. He kind of opened up his rushing ability this year. So I'm gonna say he's 3 for me. Um, and the only difference is he has a scheme in place that doesn't require him to be Superman for the team, and he's also not the perceived running back of his team. So I put him at 3. If he was the guy taking goal line carries like Allen or Hurts, he'd be number 1 for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say so because he's not that guy that has to make all the plays like Josh Allen does, and because he's not their premium running back, um, why would you have him over Lamar, for example?
So Lamar's MVP season here had like 24 passing touchdowns,
Yeah.
and I Mahomes wasn't very far behind this year on this perceived great season by Lamar. So Lamar had the best players he's had around him, I think, as a supporting cast, minus the running back position this year. Better scheme than he's had in the past, and he was very good. But I think you've seen Mahomes with his 50 some passing touchdown season. You've seen Mahomes worst season, I would say, this year from a fantasy perspective. And if this is as bad as it's going to get, I'm not concerned. I think, he's going to rebound the next couple of years. I think they're going to restock up on the offense with some young players and give him elite talent out there. So I would say he's going to be QB 2, 3, probably in redraft the next 2 years, if I had to
Yeah,
guess.
for sure. Yeah, if we were doing redraft, I'd probably have him at my number 2, to be honest.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, because of Dynasty, yeah. Okay, so number. Wait, so did you do your number 6? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
because
we went
we already went
Burrow.
over
So
Burrow.
now we're on Love. I guess we could have the conversation just kind of comparing Love and Lamar because you have them back to back, and I got Lamar in the same spot.
Okay. So yeah, so I got Jordan Love at 5. Honestly, when when I was making this list, I kind of totally forgot about him, and I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna put him in my top 10. But then I was looking at his numbers, and he had 36 or I think 36 overall touchdowns last year,
Yeah.
and I did not realize that, to be honest. And so I think he's going to build off of the end of last season. I think they're going to have, um, because I think Aaron Jones was kind of injured last year too, like over half the year. So I think having him back healthy, I think that'll open up the screens that he normally gets, and um, I think that'll help him a lot. Probably get more touchdowns, obviously more yardage and stuff. Um, so yeah, I think he'll build off of last year. He's young, so that's why I also got him up there. He's young, and um, the one downside is that he's not a huge rushing threat, so he can't. He's not a guy that you would put on the goal line and run a QB sneak most likely. And because they'd probably just hand it off to Aaron Jones or what's his name, the other guy, AJ Dillon.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of the downside there, because once you get inside the 5, then he's almost guaranteed to not get any points, in my opinion. But yeah, I got him at my 5.
So with Love, he started off strong during the year, and then he had like this month where he kind of fell off the radar
Mm-hmm.
for most people. And then he finished like the last 8 games, like you're saying, really well. One of the top quarterbacks. And I like the pieces they have on offense outside of a lot of young pieces as a supporting cast. I expect to, continue to get better. I don't know how much better they can get realistically. I think it's not smart to project out, that much growth every year on some of these people. But to me, Love is kind of the same thing as Dak, except I know for sure what Dak is. And to me, Love could fall off next year, similar to
Mm-hmm.
kind of how what we saw with Trevor Lawrence. So Lawrence a couple years ago, was it a couple years ago now? Yeah, a couple years ago, had like a really strong finish to the season, like the last 8 games. He came out real strong. I was like, here we go. This was like the guy we were expecting. And then last year, he was just awful with better players yet around him than the year before. So I'm concerned that could happen. I'm not saying it will. The other thing, too, is I think the Packers got to get some new pieces on the offensive line. But they didn't have him really in place this year, and he played well. So if I had to put him on my list, he'd probably end up right around, 11. And I would say Dak, Caleb, and Love are kind of in that tier 3 for me, where they're kind of all interchangeable. And it depends on maybe a team build you have. Are you trying to win now? You going the youth route? Are you somewhere in the middle, or just looking for, some upside with a solid quarterback? And I'd say Love
Yeah.
is, a solid quarterback as long as he stays on this trajectory or this baseline. Maybe he's not as efficient next year as he was this year, but he should still have a lot of volume with that team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I guess we can go on to Lamar.
So I consider Lamar still the best rushing quarterback in the league. He's finally got an offense that's kind of expanding what he can do in the passing game, and they've also put some more weapons around him, which is weird considering they paid him finally, and then they invest in weapons. But besides that point, I think he's got two good tight ends. Um, he's got some decent wide receivers. I expect them probably to get another wide receiver in this draft. I don't think OBJ is going to come back just based on what they have cap space wise. Because they got to try to retain some of their defense. There's a lot of pieces on their defense in free agency this year. So considering that, and then also they're going to need to get a running back.
Yep.
I think he's going to have a pretty good offense the next couple of years with a lot of young players or elite pieces at their position like Andrews.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything you said I agree with. I think his rushing ability is, like you said, very elite. And yeah, he actually has receivers now. They're not amazing by any means, but they're way more I guess accomplished than what he's had in the past.
Yep.
And yeah, I think they'll either I think they'll either get Henry or they'll draft, or they might do both. Who knows? Because Henry, I mean, he's definitely older, but he could definitely help them win right now.
Yep.
So if they get Henry or draft a good running back, that'll definitely help him with some RPOs and stuff like that. But yeah, as you were talking about earlier, even though he did win the MVP, I mean, his numbers weren't off the chart. Um, I don't think it was he had as great of a season as everyone thought. I think the issue with the MVP is that everyone only they only see the last like month or two of the season, and whoever plays the best the last month or two of the season, then they win the MVP. Because for like a overall season, I personally think Dak had a better season than him, but because Dak had a couple bad games at the end of the year, they say, oh, Dak, no, he can't win the MVP. But I'm not saying Lamar shouldn't have been in the MVP discussion. I just think that it shouldn't have been as much of a landslide in the voting as it was.
Right.
But yeah, that's the downside for me, is that he didn't have as amazing of a season, so that's kind of a little concerning, but not so much where I bump him out of my top five.
Right. And I keep him at the top of tier 2 just because he does have a higher ceiling, I think, than a Stroud, Burrow, Herbert, all those guys. Murray is the only one that could challenge him, but I don't think he has the pieces in place around him up to par with Lamar at this point. And they both kind of have that same, they've been like nicked up with lower body stuff or
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
randomly the last couple of years. Last year Lamar was pretty healthy, but the
Yeah.
2 years prior to that, after his MVP year, he kind of got beat up a little bit.
Okay, so we both went on Lamar. Okay, so my number three, I got Anthony Richardson. I think he's a huge red zone threat for TD. Obviously, huge rushing ability. He's young. He's actually only 21. So I think that definitely helps his case a lot. He seemed to have a pretty good connection last year with Michael Pittman. Um, and I know he's a free agent right now, Michael Pittman. So, but I think they'll re-sign him. I think that'll be good for him. And then I know he is coming off the shoulder injury, but I think that him going through his rehab process, I think will help him fine tune his passing mechanics. And
Yeah.
I think that'll help him. I could be I could be totally wrong. It could make him worse than what than what he was coming out of college. But I believe that that he'll be better in the passing game. And yeah, I mean, the only downside I really see is he's coming off the injury. He he's young, he hasn't proven himself really. But the flash that we did see last year, I personally liked a lot. Um, so again, like you were saying, it's probably not smart or safe to um, project him even into the top five. But I mean, I'm I don't know. I just have a good feeling about him. So
So my thing with him is going back to college. He's had a lot of injuries. He's beat up his knees, his shoulders often, had a handful of concussions. I think he even had a concussion or two last year before he hurt his shoulder.
mm,
Um, so he plays like he is a specimen. Problem is, when you do that, you do take some shots. So
yeah,
I would avoid him because of that. I don't know. I mean, it's been pretty consistent. He's had a couple injuries since 2019 every year. I'm seeing
yeah.
shoulder, knee, hamstrings, concussions, knee, ankle, hamstring, concussion, shoulder. Like those are the three things you want for a quarterback to work right. So um, I would kind of, stay away from that. That's the document I'm looking at. And I think he's, again, a top 12 quarterback. He's right on the outside of 10. If he's on the field, I think points per game, he might be top 6 if he kind of dials his passing in some more. And he was elite last year with just pretty much rushing and manufactured plays from the scheme. So I think he's got a ton of potential. If he stays healthy and proves me wrong here, he could easily climb into the top 8, Uh,
Mhm.
looking at my rankings, he may be able to replace someone like a Lamar, a Burrow, or Herbert. Probably Herbert, preferably,
Yeah.
just because I think they're gonna. For some reason, his career seems limited so far, from a fantasy perspective, not like a real game influence. But
Who, Herbert?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So um, I don't know. I'm kind of nervous to put him in the top 10.
Mhm. So yeah, then we can go on to Hertz and Allen because we both got them at 1 and 2.
What was
Um,
your deciding factor between those two?
so for me, it was because Josh Allen was the whole offense last year. Um, that he, I think he, I could be wrong on this, but I think he accounted for like over 80% of the team's touchdowns last year or something
Yeah,
crazy like that. So that's a huge aspect for me because the biggest points you can get is touchdowns, whether it's rushing or passing. Um, I know Hurts had a bunch of touchdowns too last year because of the tush push, but um, just the fact that he had that many touchdowns and for his team, it's just insane to me. I know that he throws a lot of picks, Josh Allen, but I think it's made up for by how many touchdowns he get, his rushing ability also. Um, I know Hurts has the rushing ability too, but they kind of had a bad last like 5, 6 games of last season. The
every game
Eagles,
after the Bills game.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
um, so that kind of concerns me a little bit with Hertz. There could be a period where they have to learn to adjust or find something new that works that other teams haven't figured out yet. So that was kind of my thing of why I put Allen over Hurts.
So when I'm looking at the two, straight up, if you look up history, Allen has been QB1, I think, 3 times in the last 4 years.
Yeah,
And Hertz
that
has been
that
up
too.
there,
Yeah,
the last couple of years.
numbers never lie.
Yeah, Hertz, I think 25% of his points, like going back with the Allen thing, touchdowns came off the tush push. Some people might be concerned about that. I could care less because I think he's getting in the end zone without that, just with sneaks anyway.
Mhm.
Um, he's very good at finding the gap at the line of scrimmage and getting in there. So I don't think that's really that big of an issue. My thing with him is the passing upside just isn't at the level a lot as some of these top guys. I would say he's on the same par as a thrower with like Lamar, But if you look at obviously Allen, Mahomes, Stroud, Burrow, Herbert, even Kyler, Dak, he doesn't even get close. So luckily he's got two elite outside receivers. They got a pretty good tight end. They made the running back position work with the committee, and I expect them probably to get a receiver at some point in the draft this year to kind of take over the slot role or give some flexibility to move Brown and Smith inside and out, because they both can do that and they have in the past, but it's not something they do a lot. I don't have the exact specifics on their route or snap percentages and what alignments, but I think if you're comparing the two, Allen's got the higher ceiling because I would say he's just as good of a rusher as Hurts, but he's an elite passer. That's what separates him. Plus, like you said, he is the team at this point. Yeah. And until that has to change due to age, injury, team construction, I don't expect to take him out of this spot,
Right. So, yep, that's the top 10 for quarterbacks for Dynasty Fantasy. Got anything else to add, Connor?
Not really. I'd be curious to see what happens with some of those veteran quarterbacks. They're not going to sniff the top 10, but from a performance level, if you need some spot fillers, QB3s, they could be attractive this offseason.
I think somebody else to watch. So for our mock draft that we went off of, I saw that what's his name from Michigan wasn't even in the first round, McCarthy. So who do you think he's going to go to?
Personally, I think he's going to end up going in the first round. I could see him going to anywhere between Atlanta to Denver. So I think that'd be Atlanta, Minnesota, Las Vegas, and Denver. I'm going to think one of those four teams probably takes a quarterback in the first. I don't know if we have more than four going in the first. So obviously be the top three plus McCarthy or Nix. I think Nix is kind of the guy you get.
Nix was going to the Vikings in this mock draft.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that exact player and placement. But I think he's a serviceable starter. I don't know. He may not pan out as an elite player. He may get replaced after his rookie deal because he's like the Derek Carr or whatnot, where, PFF always says, like, if you don't have one of those top 5, top 10 elite quarterbacks to give you a chance to win and carry the team, you're probably not going to win, at some point. Once you have to pay him, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, he'd be a risk for sure.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of ideally he gets put in a situation like Brock Purdy, which is unheard of, but it's possible. I mean, if it goes to Minnesota, you got, Jefferson, you got
Madison.
Hawkinson. Hawkinson, Madison, and they got some pieces there. So I don't know if they keep Osborne, but it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so that is the end. Thanks for sticking around with us.